Okay, wait for it. Here goes. December 2020. January 2021. Did you feel it? That huge shift that happens right when we make that change from one year to the next. We've been so ready for 2020 to be over something in the past. Okay. Truth of the matter is I didn't feel it either. Because it's just like turning a page on a piece of paper, actually from one calendar to the next. But we've been so ready for 2020 to be behind us. You know, as if things are going to somehow be categorically different, you know, which they're not. And yet there's this little hope that's kind of like tucked in there. A hope that so many of the complications of the last year, that they will, you know, diminish as we move into these next days of our lives. Reverend Adam Russell from Sojourners was reflecting in an article yesterday on this transition to the new year. And he was talking about New Year's resolutions. And he says this about resolutions. He says he's understood resolutions to feel like weights that can cause you to sink under the pressure and expectations, rather than a flotation device that can lift you up and help you attain your aspirations. So, as a pastor of a black church in this country, he says his preference has been to make New Year's affirmations because those feel lighter, more buoyant than this idea of resolutions. And he said in his tradition, in many other Christian traditions, there's been this remembrance on New Year's Eve of watch night parties that are times of recognition of how they've seen God moving in their lives in the last year, and looking forward, perhaps with a sense of affirmation to the next year. Like, what can we affirm? What can we aspire to or hope for as we move into the new year? For perhaps that's a way of orienting ourselves toward a new year that enables us to make this transition. Not that something magic's going to happen, you know, somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m. tonight. So I'll put a link to the article in. But one of the things that he says in terms of this affirmation is that we continue to walk through the shadow of the valley of death during the dark winter of alarming death and economic hardship. We can finally see the beginning of the end of the pandemic. And our actions and sacrifices over the first few months of this new year will determine how many lives are saved and how quickly and how equitably our nation recovers. In the midst of this hope, we must redouble, Reverend Adams says, our determination to address the pre-existing conditions of race and poverty that have fueled this crisis and created disproportionate impacts. We must ensure that vaccine distribution prioritizes not only frontline and essential workers, but also those communities of color that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. So he adds this as an affirmation. I affirm that the church will offer even greater leadership in preaching and teaching and persuading congregants and communities to wear masks and social distance for as long as is needed, which has become a core expression of how we love and protect ourselves and our neighbors. I also affirm, when it's our turn, clergy of all stripes will step up and take the vaccine, ideally sharing the event publicly to encourage others to help overcome distrust and skepticism. So he goes on to list other affirmations around hopes for our country and our world as we move into 2021. And I wonder what our own affirmations might be this year as we turn the calendar. And perhaps they're those things that could allow us to feel buoyant So we might make some time over the course of the day today to think of what we want to affirm moving into a new year. That could help us in some ways set aside some things of the past and walk into a next chapter where we might encounter God by loving neighbor and loving self. Blessings on your day as we find God in these times of COVID. Today is December the 31st, 2020.